Hello, everyone, and thank you for watching NBC6 Voices on our Facebook and YouTube pages. I'm Jawan Strader. Well, the entire month of June is Pride Month, a time where the nation brings visibility to the LGBTQ plus community. Now, as many of you know out there, being a member of the LGBTQ community is not always easy. This group of people are often marginalized economically and socially. Well, today we're joined by a diverse group of people from different backgrounds, and we will dive into the experiences and struggles that each of the individuals face, as well as what they think can be done to improve order to bringing inclusivity to the LGBTQ plus community. So please welcome transgender activist Carvel Estriplet. Carvel, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Joanne. Thank you.
Well, Carvel serves on the Wilton Manors Community Affairs Advisory Board and is also owner of Carvel Bikes in Wilton Manors. So thank you so much for joining us. I know it's been a somewhat of a tough week because this past weekend was the Stonewall Pride Parade in your city of Wilton Manors. And a tragic accident happened that day when a man accidentally lost control of his pickup truck and hit members of the gay man's chorus, killing one and injuring another. How is this tragedy, first of all, affecting you as well as the LGBTQ plus community in Wilton Manors?
I mean, I was there when the accident happened. It's there's nothing else to say than it's just awful. I mean, we all were ready to express joy and happiness, and this freak accident happened, and it's just simply awful. I mean, and for me, it's been a trying couple of days, but yeah.
Oh wow! And what's been the talk around town in Wilton Manors? How are others doing in the community?
We had a vigil a couple of days ago at the Sunshine Cathedral. That's where the gay man's choir, of course, perform and practice, and so a lot of the community came out for that. So it was great to see that unity and energy coming out for such an awful event that happened this past weekend. So,
and our prayers are going out to the victims and their families as well. Yeah, definitely, for sure, as well as the Wilton Manors community, because I know a lot of heavy hearts are there in the community. Well, I wanted to move on, Carvel, and I wanted to talk about what's happening in the state of Florida as of late, because as you know, of course, here in Florida has one of the largest populations of the LGBTQ community. Yet Governor DeSantis just banned transgender women from playing on women's high school and college sports teams. So I want to ask you about that. And then I want to also bring in Tatiana Williams, because she's a trans woman and co-founder of executive director of the Trans Inclusive Inc. group here in South Florida as well. So we're going to bring her in. But I wanted to ask you first about, what do you think about the Governor DeSantis banning transgender women from playing on women's high school and college sports teams?
First of all, I don't even want to call this party the Republican Party. They're the obstructioner party. I mean, they just, of all the things we're discussing, we're talking about trans issues, a fictional issue. Like that, I like that old quote. If somebody show you who they really are, you have to believe them. They're showing, the Republican Party is showing who they really are. They're fear-mongering. They're looking for a new bigger man, and our community, the trans community, are the new bullseye, new target. It's shameful, disrespectful. It's, again, they're obstructioner party. They're not Republicans. All their principles, all their practices are just based on hateful things. That's all. I mean, is that a good start to go with? I mean,
well, you definitely let me know exactly how you feel about
I want to be clear enough right there. So yes.
So when it happened, though, aside from the fact that it's the Republican Party, but when Governor DeSantis decided to go ahead and sign a bill, basically banning it, when that happened, I wanted to know what went through your mind and what were you hoping before that, before there was just even talk about it?
Dude, it's again, they're trying to rally up their base by finding a fear-based issue, an issue in which, okay, we can marginalize a community, and it's the same old playbook. It's tired again, and we just need all of us in the community to come back, stand up together, and fight this. I mean, fight this wave of hate, these dumb laws. So, yeah.
Do you believe that do you believe, Carvel, that it just sets you back? Because it's like you'll take, maybe 2 steps forward, but yet then 4 steps back.
That's how we're, that's exactly it. Like, we, as a community, we have a new administration. We have this issue of like trying to victimize us, the trans community, as like we're the new villains. We're the new boogeyman. So, yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about that, and let's talk more about the trans community. So let's bring in Tatiana Williams. There's Tatiana Williams right there. She's a trans woman and co-founder and executive director of Trans Inclusive Inc., a group here in South Florida. Tatiana, again, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You got it. Well, Tatiana, you've been very outspoken in our community, and I wanted to know, what do you think about what's going on, especially here in the state, especially when it comes to what I was just talking about, because I want to bring you in on this discussion as well, as far as transgender athletes.
Well, for me, it's a bigger picture for me. It's just not about the transgender athletes for me. The bigger picture is what does it look like when we talk about equality, when we talk about equity, when we talk about respect for just who we are as an individual. We have to think about the institutions. We have to think about the messaging that we are sending to our community, and these officials continue to do that. When we talk about the transgender community and the way that we live our lives and the way that we want to be respected and just live our lives, and when you have a government, when you have entities that tell us that we can't be happy and live our lives productively, that's what we have to think about. We just can't look at this particular incident, and we have to think about it this way. When he decided to sign that bill, he signed that on the first day of Pride Month. It wasn't just sending a message to the transgender community, it was sending a message to the LGBTQ community at large that there are certain things that they won't tolerate. So we have to have those conversations, those intentional conversations of what does equality look like. We talk about pride, but we're forgetting we're having pride, we're having a good time, marching in the streets, partying. However, but we have to continue to think about the history. First Pride was a riot. So we have to make sure we continue to advocate, and that's what this is about. So of course I'm upset. Of course, as an advocate, I'm on the grounds, boots on the ground, fighting, working for injustices and equality for our community. But however, you do have people that are pushing agendas that were disseminated from past administration, and it's just to build their base, as Carvel mentioned earlier. However, we have to continue to fight against that.
I'm sorry, Carvel, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I'm saying, I just want to say, well said, Tatiana. It's,
Tatiana is very passionate, which is why I'm glad that she's on the show. And Tatiana, I wanted to ask you also, because something that a lot of people may not have taken notice of is the fact that there are a lot of hate crimes out there against transgender women. Not only hate crimes, but death related to those hate crimes. A lot of transgender women who go unnoticed. You don't realize that the numbers are as high as they are, especially here in the state of Florida. Can you talk about that?
Well, we're going to talk about 29 of our siblings were murdered due to senseless violence this year alone, and 44 last year. And when you think about the statistics, and when you think about law enforcement, when you see there is no need for urgency to really curb this epidemic, that in itself lets you know how the government and how we are viewed as a whole. So it's important that we bring all of these things into play when we're advocating for one particular thing. There was a young trans individual that was bullied in school. It didn't get too much press, but that's important to bring that, because all of these things are compounding issues that we have to bring to the forefront in order to fight for equality and justice. So when you see our current governor saying, I'm going to sign this bill and I don't want transgender people doing XYZ, it sends the message to the community that it's okay to discriminate against this group of people. So we have to change what the messaging look like. People so often say, what can we do? But this is when we need you to support us as our allies and get in the fight with us.
And Carvel, what are your thoughts after hearing Tatiana speak passionately about standing up and doing something and making sure that you're speaking out against what you see as an injustice?
Yeah, I like that you brought up the point about the young Deerfield student who was being bullied, and stuff like that needs to be spotlighted. It's still that we as a community, we are still the last group that's not been put away, cast away. So fighting, standing up for our rights, and being vocal and expressing what like our needs, it's important. And I concur with Tatiana 100%. So,
and you know what, I want to hear from both of you about this, but how tough is it to be not only a transgender woman, but to be a Black transgender woman? Carvel, let me hear from you, and then Tatiana, I want to hear from you as well.
You are fighting two hills. You're not just going uphill and pushing one stone. You have two stones rolling against you every single day. It's a struggle, and having to have those two challenges already facing with you in a daily basis, and being trans and being ridiculed throughout society, it's no wonder why we, as a community, that we are having a lack of jobs, lack of shelter, lack of healthcare, lack of social rights. They want to take away that too. So it's I don't know where else to describe it than that. Every day pushing two stones up a hill.
Amen. Tatiana?
Yeah.
For me, navigating as a Black woman, and oftentimes people don't necessarily know who I am as an individual as it relates to my gender identity. But I will say this: when you talk about the lack of access to healthcare, when you talk about employment, when you talk about the inequalities, when you talk about the stigma and the transphobia, and just the thought of knowing that, you know, the life expectancy for a Black trans woman is 35 years old. So when you think about that and you're trying to navigate in these streets, what people don't understand, just being able to make it back home every day, that is a good thing. Because when we're just walking out in community, we're already putting ourselves to become a victim, because there are a lot of people do not appreciate who we are as individuals, do not care about our lives. And when you have the government continue to say that it's okay, that's putting ourselves at more risk and putting ourselves in the situations to be harmed. So for me, navigating, I try to keep myself safe, which is why I go back to law enforcement. I go back to these institutions. I go back to the community, that it's not only important for us to make sure that we're keeping ourselves safe, but we definitely need help from the larger community in itself. When it comes to Black and brown trans women, as I mentioned about Pride earlier, it was a riot. We've been putting our bodies on the line for the larger community, and it's time that community stands up and stand with us as we continue to fight for justice in this community.
Yes.
Very well, Tatiana. And speaking of sports that we were talking about a little bit earlier, many of you may be following the news. Las Vegas Raiders defensive lineman, his name is Carl Nassif. I'm sorry, Nassif. He announced that he is gay, and that went viral, and it makes him the first openly gay active NFL player in the league. Do you believe him coming out publicly will increase visibility for the LGBTQ community in sports?
Absolutely. I mean, it's every year you see more and more athletes coming out, embracing, coming out and being there himself. And then also too, I like to even inject Dwayne Wade's daughter, who came out as trans last year, and how Wade said it was watching Pose and being informed about the LGBT community has transformed his mind. So seeing pro athletes coming out, it's always a wonderful thing. And when it's being more normalized, to say, it's great to see.
Tatiana, what are your thoughts about that?
I may have to go a little left on this one. I'm trying to remember the other black guy that came out that was playing in the league. Also, I cannot remember his name right at the moment, but I think you know who I'm talking about.
Yes, I do know.
Yeah, I do know him. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, he wasn't. The thing about him though is that he wasn't. He never played an official NFL game. He played preseason, and but you remember when he got called or he got drafted, and
Right.
he had his companion with them, and they celebrated emotionally, embracing each other and everything. I know exactly who you're talking about.
So to your point, I'll say this. I don't know if it's going to bring more people out because my personal opinion, I like to tell this story back in the day when I used to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, okay.
I thought that my name was like written somewhere. My number was written in the locker room, right? And, I would meet all of these people that played on a, team. And for me, I know that there are plenty individuals that are in the NFL and in all sports that are, of the lifestyle, but I'm not sure if they're comfortable or if they're willing to possibly give up their livelihood just to, bring that inclusiveness to an overall community. So I would think that it would, but we have to think about the community in itself. When we talk about Black people, when we're talking about people of color and how you are shunned, when we're talking about the church, when we're talking about all of these things come into play when you're talking about disclosing who you are. So there are more people that are in the closet than not. I am hoping that this will set a standard and some people would come forth, but I think that's going to always be a challenge.
And that athlete's name is Michael Sam. Michael Sam. That is that athlete's name. And remember, there was an NBA player that came out after he was playing as well. But very interesting to get both of your viewpoints. And I want to thank both of you, Tatiana and Carvel, for coming on and joining me on the show. One last thing before I let both of you go. I want to know, what can the community do? What can the community do to protect trans women? Carvel, let's start with you.
I mean, if you're an ally, you just be respectful, be there. Just don't. I would say don't fear us. Just in maybe embrace us and empower us. That's the one thing I would say for that. Yeah.
Don't fear you, and if you're an ally, be there for you. Tatiana, your thoughts?
Understanding and education is key. And making sure that you all stand in the fight with us and stand beside us, and just understand that we are all more alike than not, and that we are human. That's all we're asking for. We're asking for equality. We're asking for the same thing that any American or anyone within that country that they would expect. That's all we're asking for. Nothing more, nothing less, just to be treated with human decency and respect, and to stay in the fight with us. That's all.
Tatiana, thank both of you for coming on the show and joining me today. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, also here with me is Officer James Johnson from the Coral Springs Police Department. He is a field training officer and has been serving the community for 7.5 years. He joins us now on the show. Welcome to the show, James. Officer Johnson, because I don't want to get in trouble.
Good evening. I appreciate you for having me. It's truly a pleasure to be here.
You got it, my brother. We're gonna fix that camera. There we go.
There you go.
I was bragging on your shot earlier. There we go. We're gonna get it. We got you right now. So I wanted to talk to you, Officer Johnson, and we're gonna get to what Carvel and Tatiana were talking about just moments ago. But I wanted to talk to you. You are an openly gay police officer. Which even with more progressive times, we don't see much of. And to add to that, you're also a Black man. So I want you to tell us about your experiences and if you faced a lot of difficulty because of it.
No, I can't say. I came from another agency on the West Coast. I worked over there for 3.5 years before moving to South Florida. And I can say, when I moved to South Florida and I wanted to, a fresh start, I wanted to come into the new agency as who I am, openly gay, Black police officer. I don't have to hide anything. I can truly be myself. And I think that, taking a different route and like leaving the West Coast and moving to here in South Florida and working for Coral Springs Police Department, I think that, when it comes to being Black, being gay, like I am at my all-time happiness. And I haven't felt any, I don't feel any, I guess being here in South Florida, I don't feel any different. I'm glad that I moved here. I'm glad that I'm here. And I'm glad that I'm working for an agency who supports who I am. They support what I do. They support the person that I'm dating. So I don't have to hide. I don't have to closet myself. I can be true to who I am as a person.
And Officer Johnson, I want to ask you, as far as being in that position of power, have you been able to help others maybe that may be going through things when it comes to lack of education, trying to understand them, as being part of the LGBTQ community? How have you used that as kind of part of your platform?
Well, being a police officer and having that platform as where, I'm no different than anyone else. And I do think that, police officers do have a power to a certain extent. But, for instance, maybe like a few weeks ago, there was a student in Deerfield who, he was, shunned because he became openly gay at the time. So as a police officer, I want other young men and women to know that it's perfectly okay being who you are. So even in that situation, I drafted a letter to this student, and I sent a letter to him expressing to him that who I am as a person. I've endured the exact same struggles that he endured at the time. And even, listening to his story and having him wanting to end his life because of, coming out or being gay and having to deal with what society threw at him, I wanted him to understand, and this is just one example of many examples, but I wanted him to understand that, you can be whatever you want to be. You can, ending your life or, contemplating killing yourself is, that's not the answer. I look at myself and I'm like, I've endured the exact same things that, young Black men have endured, in their young days. And I stand here before you today as I've been a police officer for 7.5 years. I work for a phenomenal agency. I'm accepted by my family, my friends, my job. There's not anything that I can complain about when it comes to being a Black gay police officer. And I wanted that student to understand that, just because one person or two people may say something about you, or they may not be, they may not accept who you are as a person, they don't define who you are. You define who you are. And I want to be a role model to anyone, whether you're heterosexual, whether you're lesbian, whether you're Black, white, Hispanic. I want to be that role model for any young adult, or even I say young adult or child, or even guys or girls who are older than me. Like, being in this profession, I wanted to be that role model, especially having, those who are part of the community. I want them to understand, like, oh, look at, Officer Johnson. He's part of the community. He's successful. He's Black. He's educated. He has a degree. Like, I can do the exact same thing.
And Officer Johnson, what about the trans community? Because you heard from Tatiana Carvel there. You heard about their concerns.
I did, and it really breaks my heart to even to know that, the trans community, they have to go through this. And as a police officer, and I can definitely speak for myself, I can speak for my agency, that God forbid something like that was to happen where I work, I am more than comfortable. I can stand by my agency to know that the crime will be investigated from start to finish and very thorough. So I do think that, every agency is different, and I'm not saying that every agency is perfect, nor am I saying that my agency is perfect. But what I'm saying that in order to implement any type of change, even like me going into this profession, I look at myself. In order to make a difference in the trans community, make a difference in the, LGBTQ community, you have to be a part of it. So I'm only one person. I can't, take on the world. I like to think that I can, and I like to try to, but in order for us to be a part of the change, in order for us to implement change, we have to get more of us part of the, government, law enforcement, in the judicial system. Like, there has to be more of us in this profession in order to implement any type of change.
And what's the biggest thing that you would like to see, as far as the biggest change that you would like to see within law enforcement and the gay community?
I think that, we're in the 21st century, so law enforcement is evolving every single day. And I know that I hear from other agencies, and I hear from other officers, and I hear from people outside of the agency that I work at, to hear the things that they've endured. And, I like for the law enforcement community to be more educated on the LGBTQ community. I want them to be more knowledgeable. They're no different than anyone else, or we're no different than anyone else. The same way that you talk to your mother, your brother, your sister, your uncle, your family relative, the same exact way that you can talk to someone who's a part of the gay community.
Well, I believe that you are a role model, Officer Johnson. I want to thank you so much for joining us, and I want to thank you for your service along with your colleagues. Thank you. And thank you for speaking to our community and with me tonight. I really appreciate you.
Absolutely. And I appreciate it. And I'm glad to be here. And last thing I want to add is that, anyone that's, having they're contemplating, coming out of the closet, or, they're afraid to come out of the closet. I want them to understand that there's 3 things that I want them to choose: is love, happiness, and peace. If there's any family member, any job, any profession, promotion, relationship, friendship, if that's going to cost you those 3 things, it's not worth it. Because once you become true to who you are as a person, being openly gay, or being, once you become true to who you are, nothing else makes a difference. And those who love you, care about you, they're going to accept you either way.
That's right. So very well said, Officer Johnson. Thank you. Thank you, my brother.
Thank you. And you have a great day. I appreciate it.
Okay, you too. I appreciate you.
Take care.
All right. Well, our final guest today is Dr. Raquel Lopes. Dr. Lopes is a Black and lesbian professional. She's the director of the World's AIDS Museum, an educational center, as well as an acupunctural physician as well. Oh, wow. You know what? I didn't even know that part. Welcome, Dr. Lopes. Welcome to the show once again.
Thank you for having me here tonight.
I really appreciate it. I hope you've been listening in, because we've had a great discussion tonight as far as education is concerned.
Absolutely.
And so I got to ask you, and we're going to kind of go back. I want to ask you some similar questions, because you're not only Black, but a lesbian. So tell us a bit more about your experience living in today's climate.
I have for my entire life known that I enjoy the company of women. And so knowing that, I also went to a progressive kind of school at Barnard College in New York City. So I was in an environment that allowed me to express myself and to grow as myself. And that allowed me to be able to have a voice and to be able to use the voice. And so I will say that the Northeast and South Florida are 2 different environments. And I have found that although they're different, there are some similarities. I find that the lesbian community is a community that is looking to help one another. I have also found that it's also parceled out. You have certain groups that stay within themselves. And I did not find that the same in New York City. So that was definitely a change that I had to work through. I have always been open and out in all of my jobs. And so the kinds of comments that I may get are just comments that people are just not educated and just don't know. And some are frustrating, and some are an opportunity for learning, opportunity to be able to educate people. And that's what I've really done most of my life. Even in my freshman year in college, I had someone who, a floor mate, that was absolutely the opposite of who I was. And we found a friendship and a commonality that allowed us to be able to speak frankly of our differences and be able to show each other our differences in a really positive light. And I think that that's what we're missing sometimes, is that we're not able to really sit down with one another and really have that conversation because of fear or because of insecurity or any of the other isms that you may have. And so that's what I really try to do, is really tell my story and be able to tell the story for people to really understand.
And Dr. Lopes, I want to ask you, do you feel yourself having to fight two fights, one for the LGBTQ plus community and then the other one for being a Black woman?
I mean, yeah, there are some dualities in that I am a Black woman. So when you see me, you see that first, and you make up whatever story you're going to make up about that. As an acupuncture physician, people are a little surprised when they walk in the door and see me, because they've already made up an assumption of what an acupuncture physician would be like. I'm out in community, and people assume that I have a background that is stereotypical of a Black woman. And stereotypes are just that. They are stereotypes. All of us come from different backgrounds, and then we're not all the same. I even go into stores when people say to someone of color or another Black woman, are you guys together? I'm like, I take a random white person. Are you with them? Because it's really an educational moment to say, why, just because we have the same skin color, does that mean that we know each other?
Right.
You know,
Well,
we do that.
We know the saying, all Black people know each other, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
perhaps you know them.
We've heard that before. We've heard
Absolutely.
that. So,
And we also see it in the LGBTQ community, because one, you're supposed to know all. And I'm like, perhaps you know them. No, I don't know them.
It's all about education. I always say this.
Absolutely. It is. It really is.
Well, speaking of education, let's go back to the World's AIDS Museum, because you're the executive director there. Can you dismantle the myth surrounding the LGBTQ community being the only group of people that contract AIDS? Because there was a lot more education, I think, when AIDS came out. I mean, when we first started understanding it, and then trying to get a grip on it and trying to educate the communities, there was so much. And then I don't see as much anymore, which is interesting.
I think there's a misnomer that HIV and AIDS is over and that we don't have to worry about it. And that's so far from the truth. And when you look at the numbers of people of color, specifically African-American women and men who are testing positive for HIV, those are alarming numbers. But those are not numbers that weren't similar to what we saw in the beginning. Yes, gay men were the epicenter of HIV, but what that did was it didn't allow us to really look broader into the communities, because my first experience with HIV was a heterosexual African American woman. It wasn't a gay man. And so this is 1985, when I was a buddy for the Minority Task Force on AIDS. It is something that we have to get over the stigma that we have placed on HIV in order for us to really combat this disease in a way that's really going to be beneficial for all. It's not a gay disease. It's not an IV drug user disease. It's not about who you are. It's really about behaviors and what behaviors you are engaged in. And so that's what we really need to talk about, not who people are, but the behaviors, and so that we can use tools in our toolbox to protect ourselves from that.
And my last question here for you. Do you think that we've come far in the fight for inclusivity?
I always see it as a locomotive. The train keeps going and you can't ever stop it. And there are strides in it, but how far have we come? Because people are still marginalized. People are still being victims of hate crimes. And so until we can really have some honest conversations I mean, really honest conversations that are vulnerable. And I always think that vulnerability is a superpower. It's not a deficit. It is how we get through life to be able to be more powerful. Because when we lay everything on the table, there's nothing that anybody can hold against you anymore. So that you can have honest conversations about what's really going on. And so I think we have made strides, and we still have some places to go.
Amen. So very
Mhm.
true. Dr. Raquel Lopes, thank you so much for joining us. And
Thank you.
thank you for your insight, your
Mhm.
education, all at the same time. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, everyone. That is our show for tonight. You can rewatch this episode on our Facebook and YouTube pages or on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock a.m. Be sure to follow me on Instagram or Facebook. I'm at Juwan NBC6. You can also message us on social media if you have a story idea. And before we go, remember, you heard me say it there. Education is the key to success. If you believe, you will succeed. We'll see you next time. Have a great week.